Hello, everyone. I'm LiveScope, bringing you the latest headlines from the United States, the United Kingdom, and around the world.
Washington, D.C. is at a critical juncture as lawmakers race to prevent a partial U.S. government shutdown ahead of the end-of-month funding deadline. At the heart of the debate is the Department of Homeland Security budget, which includes funding for immigration enforcement operations. Senate Democrats, led by Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, are pushing for reforms aimed at increasing accountability within ICE and Customs and Border Protection. These include mandatory body cameras during enforcement operations, restrictions on the use of force, and clearer reporting requirements for arrests and deportations. The push comes in response to nationwide protests over controversial enforcement actions, including 2 recent fatalities in Minneapolis that involved U.S. citizens during immigration raids. Republicans emphasize the importance of maintaining DHS funding without additional policy conditions, arguing that tying reforms to the spending bill could jeopardize critical federal services. The disagreement has slowed progress in Congress, with both sides signaling a willingness to negotiate but remaining firm on key priorities. Analysts warn that failure to reach a deal could furlough hundreds of thousands of federal employees and disrupt essential services, from airport security to disaster response programs. Economists also caution that prolonged uncertainty may weaken consumer confidence and affect financial markets, adding pressure on lawmakers to find a compromise quickly. Public concern is high, and the looming deadline is shaping political debates nationwide, with implications for voter perception ahead of midterm elections. Lawmakers continue negotiations behind closed doors, balancing political pressure, legislative priorities, and the practical impact of potential federal disruptions. The ongoing immigration enforcement operations in Minneapolis, known as Operation Metro Surge, have sparked widespread national attention and public protests. Federal authorities, including ICE and Customs and Border Protection, have conducted targeted raids to apprehend undocumented immigrants, but the operations have drawn scrutiny after 2 U.S. citizens were fatally shot. The deaths have ignited protests not only in Minneapolis but in major cities across the country, with demonstrators calling for accountability, policy reforms, and more transparent federal enforcement practices. Local officials in Minneapolis, including Mayor Jacob Frey, have publicly urged federal agents to exercise restraint, focusing on criminal cases rather than broad community sweeps. State leaders, including Attorney General Keith Ellison, criticized federal authorities for withholding the identities of agents involved in the shootings, citing transparency concerns. These events have brought the federal government into direct conflict with local governance and sparked national debates about immigration policy, civil liberties, and law enforcement oversight. The protests have expanded into a broader movement, advocating for reforms to federal immigration enforcement, highlighting systemic issues and the need for legislative oversight. Legal experts and civil rights organizations are closely monitoring developments, emphasizing the importance of balancing public safety with human rights and constitutional protections. The Minneapolis operations, coupled with nationwide political reactions, underline the intense scrutiny and public sensitivity surrounding federal enforcement tactics, shaping both local and national policy discussions. In foreign policy news, President Donald Trump has escalated rhetoric toward Iran, signaling a heightened U.S. military posture in the Middle East. Reports indicate that administration officials are evaluating potential targeted strikes intended to deter Iranian nuclear ambitions and influence internal political dynamics. While no military action has been formally authorized, the U.S. Navy has deployed additional warships, including elements of the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, to the region as a show of force and strategic deterrence. This increase in U.S. military presence coincides with widespread unrest in Iran, where protests over economic hardship and political repression have gained momentum. The administration frames these actions as both protective and preventive, emphasizing the need to safeguard U.S. interests, allies, and regional stability. International observers, including NATO allies, have expressed cautious support for deterrence measures, but advocate for diplomacy to avoid potential escalation. Domestic political reactions are mixed. Some lawmakers commend the administration's firmness, while others caution against over-reliance on military action and call for robust congressional oversight. Analysts note that any U.S. military engagement could have global economic repercussions, affecting oil markets and international relations. The situation underscores the interconnected nature of U.S. foreign policy decisions and domestic political considerations, highlighting the importance of strategic diplomacy alongside military readiness. The Federal Reserve announced today that it will hold interest rates steady in its first policy meeting of 2026, keeping the federal funds rate at 3.50% to 3.75%. The decision reflects a careful balancing act between containing inflation, supporting employment, and sustaining economic growth. While inflation has eased slightly in recent months, prices remain above the Fed's long-term target, prompting officials to maintain caution. Two Fed members dissented, advocating a rate cut to stimulate growth in response to slowing consumer spending and declining confidence. Economic indicators released this week highlight mixed trends. Weekly jobless claims fell slightly, signaling continued labor market resilience, though some sectors face layoffs due to technological shifts and restructuring. Consumer confidence dropped to levels not seen since 2014, reflecting concerns about rising costs and uncertainty in housing, healthcare, and daily expenses. Corporate earnings, particularly in technology and finance, remain strong, providing some optimism, though investors remain cautious, given inflationary pressures and geopolitical risks. The Fed's decision will influence borrowing costs for households and businesses, affecting mortgages, auto loans, and corporate financing. Analysts expect markets to respond cautiously, balancing optimism from corporate earnings with broader economic uncertainties. Policymakers will continue monitoring labor, inflation, and global events, as these factors will shape future monetary policy and the broader economic outlook for 2026. Healthcare costs have emerged as a top concern for American families in 2026. Federal reports indicate that rising premiums, combined with reduced access to subsidized insurance, have made affordability the primary pocketbook issue for voters. Enrollment in the Affordable Care Act has declined since federal subsidies expired, leaving many households struggling to pay for coverage. The increase in costs is leading some Americans to postpone medical care, highlighting inequities in the healthcare system and fueling debate over policy reform. Simultaneously, civic engagement is on the rise, as citizens respond to controversies surrounding government policies, including immigration enforcement and public spending. Grassroots movements are gaining momentum, holding town halls, organizing protests, and advocating for policy changes in local and federal government. Social media and local organizations amplify these efforts, reflecting a broader desire for transparency, accountability, and reform. In response, policymakers are examining strategies to address healthcare affordability and public participation. Initiatives include exploring alternative insurance models, expanding access to preventative care, and increasing transparency in federal spending. These developments demonstrate the interconnected nature of economic pressures, social activism, and government responsiveness. As Americans navigate rising costs and participate in civic discourse, these issues are expected to play a central role in the political and social landscape throughout 2026.